Hello, and hola for those Spanish speakers. My first language is Spanish, by the way, so if anybody wants to come after the talk and speak to me in their native language, I'm here. That's the wrong promotion for the wrong country, but anyways, just throwing it out there. My name is Leif, and I'm coming here from all the way from San Francisco Bay Area, Pixar Animation, to talk a little bit about ways that you can learn amazing tools in Solaris and RenderMan. I have a background as a CG supervisor and CG Generalist in commercials and television for over a decade of production work. And I've been at the RenderMan team for about 8 years, a little bit over 8 years, as a RenderMan specialist. And what that means is that I'm there to kind of break the render and make everyone miserable at our engineering team. But that helps artists out there get really awesome tools, and that helps me collaborate with studios and artists at large and talk about ways to use RenderMan and to keep people creative. So we'll talk a little bit about that outreach as well and fun ways to get kind of hands-on mentorship for the RenderMan Art Challenge later on. Of course, here talking about Solaris, as you must know, it's an amazing tool that we've embraced, because it's USD-centric. And that means it's more Pixar tech. Who here has ever heard of RenderMan as a technology by show of hands? Okay, I got one guy in the back. All right. And how many of you have actually used RenderMan? And then okay, a lot of you. That's great. So, of course, you must know about our other big initiative out there, Universal Scene Description. And this came, of course, about because RenderMan films or Pixar films became very, very heavy, very, very complex to describe, in multiple ways as technologies evolved. And this has been an amazing technology, but one that's been a little bit difficult to implement historically until new initiatives and until SideFX created this wonderful tool called Solaris. And why Solaris? Well, because it makes that kind of difficult big pipeline chunk of USD super easy and creative to implement in your pipeline. It creates kind of a USD Pixar-centric workflows for anyone out there. That's a wonderful thing. Of course, that means that we also kind of have to adapt, right? And we're also evolving technologies at RenderMan. We've been launching little by little our new version of our renderer called RenderMan XPU. Anyone familiar with RenderMan XPU? Yeah? Well, it's a really cool render because it's a true XPU render. It's a one code base that talks to the CPU or the GPU or both. And it gives you kind of identical pixels on both ends. And that's been a really tough thing to pull off properly and to handle really kind of big production size scenes. And we're at this very last stage this year, making it production ready. And we have things like mesh lights and deep data and VFX workflows and Llama, all kinds of things that kind of make it a production-ready render at last. And then we're hoping to deprecate risk in the next couple of years and make XPU our first-class citizen. So, that means that why are we going through this GPU route? Well, at Pixar, we're always kind of looking ahead. And sometimes we're looking very far ahead. We're looking sometimes 5-10 years ahead, and that was how RenderMan was started, actually. We developed RenderMan and wrote the algorithms a decade before you could actually press the render button because the compute power and the memory just wasn't there yet. And the GPUs were the same way. We have a kind of a necessity to put a bunch of data at Pixar in the GPU, and that wasn't really a thing until recent. If you look 10 years back, the average GPU probably had around 8 gigs of RAM or less. And you really can't fit almost any production scene, as you can see here, in less than 8, 12, and in this case, 24. But we knew that Moore's Law eventually was going to take us there. And the current generation of GPUs with the Ada, you can actually fit the majority of Pixar scenes. And little by little, this GPU realization started to become really interesting for us as we tried to merge with that reality down the line. And today, that became reality with Jensen, of course, and announcing the Blackwell series of GPUs and being able to fit 99% of Pixar shots within that 96 gig limit of the new GPUs, which only leaves about 1% of shots that exceeds that in the average Pixar film. And that's why we've written XPU this way, because of course there's still need for system RAM. There's still need to go out to 200 something gigs of RAM for a shot. And you can use the CPU for that, and you need those compatible pixels and sampling algorithms. So, of course, that's kind of a lot, and I know that's, not everybody's rendering Pixar complexity out there, and that's expensive and complicated. But I want to share with you guys a little bit of how you, a single artist, can go out there and learn RenderMan if you haven't used it. One of my favorite things is reaching out to artists, and I reached out to Chris about this project called, I think I'm pronouncing this wrong, but it's an alien name, so I don't think it matters, Elucidea. And this was a super fun project. For about 3 months, we went back and forth into developing Solaris-centric workflows that mimicked Pixar-recommended workflows. And this project is there to download today, so you can get this, inspect it, and see what these Pixar folks kind of have in store for you of how you should be using the tool set with RenderMan. This was Chris and I talking about it at the Vancouver UGM. We hope to be doing more of these. We really hope to be doing one in London and more now that things are more normalized after COVID and we're getting out there more. Some of the motivations for this project were, of course, about improving the product, which is one of the segments I love about my day-to-day. And to look at it from Chris's perspective of being a senior artist, but a RenderMan newbie. And it's a wonderful combination to have, because you bring a lot of muscle memory to projects, and you react to new tools in different ways. You get annoyed in different ways. You expect different things. And we also discovered that there are a lot of unknowns about RenderMan, things that we have to document better so that people expect and kind of see things in different ways than they were used to. And this is, I love zooming in this, because who doesn't love an 8K image? But it can, if you go in there, you can actually test layered surfaces, and we have layered skin shaders, so you can learn the particularities about subsurface scattering and the path tracing algorithms and the Pixar shaders and what makes them unique. Of course, we're not only limiting it to that, we're putting some gold freckles on there, and you guys can test what these shading algorithms look like. And it's XPU ready. So that's the fun thing about it, is that you can actually use your GPU to run this. It runs in about 11 to 12 gigs of RAM. So, a high-end GeForce or kind of a low-end Quadro card would do. And it has other kind of pro things like layered skin materials and bump mapping in ways that are pretty complicated. It's not just a single map. There's a lot of complexity in there, including the irises and the eye shaders, etc. There are some interesting plays here with some iridescence and gold shaders and jewels in the fabric, which are always fun to explore. So go out there and download it. It's a ton of fun. Of course, he was really scared about losing details. And these were one of those unknowns, because we have this particularity about RenderMan that we don't tessellate like other renders. We use micropolygon dicing, which means we're making every single pixel, we're kind of automatically LODing everything. So if you're far back there in the distance, you're going to get a much coarser tessellated thing that you're getting up close. And this is all automatic. And you don't have to kind of fidget with the tessellation settings and making things super crisp out of the box. But that does introduce kind of a new way of thinking about how to get detail out. So he built these things in Solaris after he learned about micropolygon length and little kind of tips and tricks about RenderMan that are peculiar to the rendering algorithm. So all these things are included in the proceduralism that Solaris kind of gives us. Of course, he animated this. He was more comfortable doing these animations through MetaHuman and Maya and making rigs. And that's the magic of USD, is that you can get this stuff out really easily. And Solaris plays really nicely with these caches. So this scene is full of different animations, close-ups, like the earrings animate, the cloth does. So you can test things like, our machine learning denoiser, how well it does in cross-frame, and temporal stability, which is given to you with the animation. You can test XPU speed, all kinds of things, motion blur. So it's not just like a static bust scene, which is most typical out there. He put a bunch of effort on this, and it's pretty amazing. I love this thing because he kind of made this little look dev node, which is really only possible in Solaris. You have these procedural workflows where you can kind of just drag and drop, no coding involved, no difficult coding, just drag and drop things and make menus, make a user experience where you're exposing the most important things to the user. And that was super fun to see. Of course, shading and lighting, huge part of Solaris. Probably the main thing of Solaris, right? So we have all kinds of little cool features here to actually test displacements in real time. We're probably aging there 1,000 years. But you can start seeing how XPU is really powerful. This is a powerful machine, of course. It's got about 60 cores and an Ada RTX 6000. These aren't cheap things, of course. But if you can fit this creature within those 11 gigs of RAM with a 4K image, you can play with it and get acquainted with it. And if you lower the resolution, you get lower MIPS and lower fidelity, but you can also kind of run it in XPU, or you could even use the CPU mode. So it's really built openly so that you can take advantage of the new workflows that we're working on. So we're about halfway. I have gone a little bit fast, but if you want to take a moment, and bookmark this with the QR code, go get it. It's a big project. It's like 40 gigs. There's a lot of amazing data in there, and it's a really wonderful intermediate way of learning Solaris. And we'll talk a little bit about if you're a student, if you're really introducing yourself to these tools from scratch, there might be even simpler solutions. Of course, this is made possible by the fact that trying these tools is free. You can go and download non-commercial RenderMan on our website. No strings attached. I think the only thing that's not available in the non-commercial version is our stylization toolset. That doesn't really apply to this particular project, so you have all of the project to yourself, and you can go in there and play with it. So there are easier ways to learn as well. We have a digital studio, which was made by a really cool artist in our team called Eugene Rikansky. You can learn different types of layering, and it really kind of breaks it apart in a USD-centric way. This isn't just like putting an asset in the light and shading it and calling it a day. It has a really kind of intricate, interesting breakdown, and he breaks it down really nicely in the documentation as well. And like the simplest way to learn, of course, is our famous RenderMan walking teapot. The scene is an asset, a light, and a shader, and you can really get the basics of how cool Solaris is, how quick it is to iterate, and how easy it is to implement RenderMan. How many of you, by show of hand, knows about the RenderMan walking teapot? Oh, a lot of you. So you'll be excited to know that I've got 3 walking teapots right here, and they will be handed out by the maker, the one and only little Sisson in the back. So for the first 3 Q&A questions when we're done with our talk. So hopefully that should be fun. There are, of course, more ways to learn. And one of the biggest ways to learn is our RenderMan Art Challenge. The RenderMan Art Challenge came about because RenderMan can be a very big production-heavy tool. And you can keep your ambitions low like a teapot, but if you really want to understand how this works at a production studio, if you really want to level up your tool set, you want to do something of complexity, and that takes time. And a lot of times, folks just don't have the ability to do this unless they get to a big production house or they know somebody that knows these tool sets. So we developed the RenderMan Art Challenge as a big community event where we get Pixar folks involved, and you get to download a scene and create something amazing. We're running these on Discord now every fall. So how does it work in practical terms? It works that we give you a Pixar scene, or in this case, a historic scene. We gave away the Pixar computer, and we partnered with NVIDIA and AMD, and they gave us chips and all kinds of transistors, and it was a lot of fun to get these things. Some of these models weren't render ready, some of them were, and you're supposed to create something amazing out of this. And the next images that I'll show are going to be the top 3 entries from this challenge last year. And I think you're going to be surprised what people created out of this, which looks very uninteresting. The first place winner was Margot Brun, the robot artist. So people get amazingly creative, and we'll talk a little bit about how they get there in a bit. There's a level of complexity and love that folks put through these challenges. And I think all of them actually were first-time RenderMan users. So, this isn't something that you need to be afraid of if you're familiar with other renders. In fact, some of these people had never used a production render, had only used a real-time render, so we really guided them through this process completely. And they're not doing this for their health, right? I mean, they're learning something amazing, but they're also learning because there's a lot of incentive. We give away some brilliant prizes thanks to our partnerships with AMD, Dell, NVIDIA, and other amazing sponsors. Side Effects, of course, has been there from the beginning, giving away professional versions of Houdini for the winners, so that's also something to look forward to. We gave away laptops with NVIDIA and AMD tech last time, and it was pretty awesome. It does change the way people work. It is not cheap to get these high-end things, so we do this by taking as much bias as we can during the judging process. We have Pixar judges, and we look at all the final entries in the big Pixar theater, and we talk about them. And most importantly, we hold Zoom sessions throughout the 90 days that the competition lasts. And we give people feedback once a week, and we ramp up to twice or 3 times a week at the very end for many hours at a time, hoping that people feel inspired. They don't feel alone. Of course, they're not doing this in group. They're in their home alone. So it's really important for us to engage with them and get them motivated. This is a lot of compute. Those images that you saw are highly sophisticated, complex images. So we provide also cloud rendering. We partnered with Ranch Computing, AMD, and AWS, so that you can upload, if you're in Maya, in Blender, and in Houdini, and in Solaris, you can actually upload all your project to an online farm and get the same exact speed that we get at Pixar, and you can render those and while you keep working locally. So it's a really cool thing that we do for the last month of the art challenge. So what does a winning entry look like, of course? If you're kind of intrigued, it's not an easy thing to kind of gauge, like art is subjective. But because we're Pixar, we are looking at it with a Pixar eye. We are motivated and interested in your technology, but we're also equally interested and invested in the art and the story you're telling. And I wanted to show this really cool image by Daniel Mill, because he did this not only as a first-time RenderMan user, he did this as a first-time Solaris user. This was for the NASA Art Challenge some years ago. And this is a really cool image. It didn't start this way, of course, and he went through a lot of different kind of techniques to get it to this point. But this was an interesting challenge because we gave them a bunch of assets that really weren't render ready, that they were CAD data from NASA. And it's never going to look good, so they had to remodel stuff and put their heart into it. And there's a lot of love here that's artistic. Your leading lines with the stairs and the views, like using the golden ratio to make a beautiful composition, or the rule of thirds to make sure that your framing and your balance is really appropriate. And those are the kinds of discussions that we're having. We're not only getting on Zoom and complaining about some bug or some issue that you can't get through. It's so much about storytelling and art. And we're working on this scene to bring it soon to the website so that you can actually download, see what a winning entry looks like in Solaris and RenderMan, and it's really fast. And this is a RIS render because these are all llama shaders, so you get a lot of cool technology. But it's a really great way to test the interactive denoiser and a bunch of other Solaris workflows that we have now. So if you're looking forward to this and you want to share it, this is in August 13. We're going to be announcing it at the Art and Science Fair, which is a big event that we hold during SIGGRAPH. So look out for that. And we're a little early, which is great. And I want to thank you so much for coming. Let me see if I can get these teapots out. Yeah. Let's see.
So many questions all of a sudden. Whoa.
Say I'm a long-time Arnold user, and I'm I only do the Arnold. How would you convince me to switch to RenderMan?
How would I convince you? Oh
Yeah.
no. Tell me RenderMan. I don't think that's a good way to go about it. I think the way to go about it is downloading these very simple scenes and seeing how it compares to you. The rendering experience is such a personal thing, and the way we render pixels, although all the renders now are pretty much using a Monte Carlo path tracer, the way by which we interface with the artist, our user experience, things like dicing or the shader libraries, everything is very Pixar-centric. So it's a very different experience. We build RenderMan for Pixar, for big studios, for those needs. And it's an entire different way of working in many ways that might or might not be for you. And the best way to kind of look at it is seeing if that mentality accommodates your workflows. I fell in love with it when I was in production. At the time, we were running other renders, Mental Ray and other defunct renders. But when we went into RenderMan, the stability of it really made a huge difference for us. It's tested and battle tested in the biggest productions. And the fact that you have all these tool sets from Pixar and they're being tested there first for years before they come out, and things like Llama from ILM kind of built the confidence and stability in our departments that was second to none. So those might be some convincing things, but ultimately it's up to you. So thank you. Here's a teapot.
Oh my God, thank you.
Yeah, I got it. That was the main motivating factor. Yes, over there. Over here. We'll go. So we'll do you after. Yeah, so we'll go with you afterwards. Yes.
I have an additional question on this point. Where is RenderMan seeing itself in regards to independent artists and freelancers? Because a lot of features seem to be very powerful when you work in a big studio environment, and kind of feels me sometimes a bit frustrated because I love the product, but I feel a little bit left out because I just have 16 gigs now finally on my GPU.
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's why we have certain technologies that like RenderMan at the studio that are studio centric, and that's why we kind of planned our GPU render in this way, and that it really had to fit Pixar shots into memory. We could have probably made a render earlier that was not production kind of heavy, that prioritized the user experience and probably kind of got that going. But we really wanted to make sure that it was going to serve these big productions. We're at that point now. And you're right, GPUs are still expensive. On the lower end or the medium end, GeForces, they do still have low memory. The good thing about RenderMan is that it's not thanks to MIP mapping, if you're looking at textile data, camera distance-based or resolution-based, you're looking at dicing in different ways, which is an automatic level of distance, basically. You don't have to anticipate these massive geometric complexities, put them all in the RAM at once. You can actually account for so much more based on resolution, and you can take these memory requirements down significantly. We've also architected it so that you can still get a much faster render, up to 2, 3, or 4x faster on the CPU version of XPU. For production scenes, we're seeing 1.5, 2x. For simpler scenes, the CPU version of XPU will be significantly faster than RIS already. So that's the magic of it, is that if you don't have the right resources, but you still want to have the quicker speeds, the CPU might be where you want to invest your money instead. So we leave it up to the artist what he wants to do. And, and these projects like Elucidea with Chris, illuminate our necessity and our thirst to go out to artists and understand their needs and complexities and how we have to evolve the product to make sure that single artists are happy. We hope that with NCR and the Art Challenge, people kind of feel like they can actually be, in a community that fosters that growth. They don't have to go through that pain alone. So hopefully you can join or be on Discord, but we're definitely there. So thank you for that question.
I'm already on the Discord.
Great.
So when it comes to the dicing, which I'm not really familiar with how it works, you said it has something to do with distance from camera, I guess. And is it like on a per object base? So if I have like a very large object, because right now in the studio we're doing a lot of environments in height fields in Houdini, which like span like a kilometer. From like super close up to camera to very far away. So would it make sense in RenderMan to like separate it in different objects to make the dicing more efficient?
Right, and those are one of the unknown questions. That's a very good question, but you're formulating it in a way that you're constructing the question based on what you know, which is super natural, right? And Chris had the same exact question as you. Like, I do this over here, how do I do that over here? And it's hard to ask the question of, I do this here, teach me how to do it all over again in a different way here. To even ask the question seems strange, right? So that's why these projects are fun, because RenderMan doesn't really work that way. And it works, and these are things that leverage open subdiv, for example. So all these things would have to be open subdivision. You can take geometric complexity way down, depend on displacement maps, and you don't have to do anything. It's not on a per object basis. It is on a camera distance and pixel size basis. So if things are far, things will be coarser automatically without sacrificing any image detail. So and you can, if you wanted to, tag something by saying be sharper or be less sharp, right? Or divide that one pixel in less micropolygons. And this is one of the technologies, actually, that's been sticking with RenderMan for quite a while, from the very beginning, dicing. It's a very particular RenderMan way of working, and it's designed to fit 1 trillion polygons, literally, like in Toy Story 4, on screen at once, through subdivision and dicing. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No problem. This like reminds me of like the newer like nanite stuff in Unreal Engine, where they do like a similar thing to get more, basically more.
So nanite it's a similar idea, but it's constructed very differently in that it tessellates dynamically. You're loading everything at once, these massive geometric complexities, right? That you don't take a penalty for tessellating any of this. So it's constructed dynamically in a way that it uses open subdivision, not polygons. So it is the tessellation understanding through RenderMan. It takes a little bit of like learning, those processes, but hopefully I'm not making you more confused. But I would definitely try it out. I think it has a little bit of that nanite mentality of automation and taking that off the hands of artists and making complexity kind of a crucial aspect of what you win. So hopefully that makes sense.
But it is not like pre-computed, right?
It's not pre-computed. It's an automatic thing that's within the tessellation algorithm of RenderMan. And it's completely automatic. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Good question.
Any other questions? We don't have any more teapots, but we're definitely welcoming more questions.
Hey. So you've mentioned that, like 99% of the movies in Pixar from the recent years from the graph now can be fitted onto 96 gigabytes of VRAM. So do you think in the future this race to get as much of VRAM as possible kind of will slow down eventually? Because like those movies from the graph, like they already look quite realistic. And if you compare, for example, like Toy Story 1 to Toy Story 4, it's a huge difference. And I don't think that, it will be the same difference from Toy Story 4 to Toy Story 8, for example, right? So do you think, what's the future of RenderMan? Is it to, in the long term, is it like to optimize processes even more? Or is it to crave for more VRAM and have the same mentality that like eventually there's going to be GPUs with even more VRAM come into the future?
That's a really good question. It talks about the future. We just came from a trip actually at Disney Research where those are all the right questions to ask, right? Where are we heading? What are we doing about that? Are we using upscaling? Are we actually rendering that natively? What does that mean? How can we use machine learning like in the denoiser with our own training sets from our movies, right? To actually inform the renderer, hey, by the way, this is probably what sampling looks like mostly. All that stuff is going to reduce rendering time, reduce the amount of RAM you likely need if you have a really amazing upscaler. There's all kinds of interesting research done for that future. I think if you look at the past, there are two laws. Moore's law, which most of you might be familiar with, which about every 18 months, compute capacity doubles. But there is an opposing law that it's not that well known, which is called Blind's law. And Blind's law, yes, the same dude that invented the Blind shader, said that there's a pain tolerance that artists are willing to deal with. And frames at Pixar have stayed around an hour a frame forever, and eventually if you give more speed to folks and the ability to put more complexity, it is a competing factor to want to be more creative, to do new kinds of images, to put new detail, to make the image stand out in ways that you couldn't do before. So speed, or the ability to stay within a budget of RAM isn't a big motivating factor where you're trying to do really groundbreaking creative choices. Now, this might mean, and we're already seeing this, that 4K TVs are pretty standard now. So rendering in 4K not only doubles your resolution, it quadruples it, in fact, which means your MIPS are much higher because they're coming into the camera at much higher res. The tessellation or the dicing is much finer. All these things increase RAM. So we aren't really hoping for some sort of sweet spot where we're leveling off and hopefully we don't have to use more RAM. We think that RAM will still be a thing. And RAM limitations will still be a thing. That's why we developed XPU as a CPU renderer as well, that has complete parity with the image of the GPU version. So whenever you see yourself in that kind of dynamic, you can work maybe with the GPU on lower res, which our artists do actually at Pixar. They work in lower res generally. And you send out a massive render, which uses more RAM, but that's on the CPU side. And system RAM is cheap, so who cares, right? So there are all kinds of workflows that come to mind. And in 10 years, we might be rendering in 8K, So there's going to always be a new need. I don't think we're going to hit a sweet spot. There hasn't been a history of that. Artists at Pixar just get crazy more detail on screen. So yeah, somebody called it stuff per pixel. That always seems to increase. So yeah, well, thank you. Any more questions? Yes, back there. Thanks. This Q&A is lasting like triple my talk.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. And I have a question. I'm very curious about the XPU in particular. So we are rendering with GPU and CPU at the same time. And for example, I have my scene, and which parts are going to be processed and rendered with CPU and which parts with GPU, like how this algorithm works.
That's interesting. Yeah. So imagine XPU not as something that's picking something from your scene. Some renderers are architected that way. Some engines are actually streaming data, while something is being processed by the CPU, while some other algorithms, they're doing only tensor core operations on the GPU. And all these things are kind of accumulated in pixels in an interesting way. RenderMan doesn't really work that way. It's one piece of code, and that's why it's been such a hard mission to do this. It's one piece of code that then seeks for permission to process those codes completely individually. So the scene is red, we're looking at that, and then the same algorithms are going to be looking for silicon. They're going to be saying, are there CPUs? How many do you want to give me? Are there GPUs? Let's accumulate these pixels equally. And it doesn't take anything from the artist to understand this. Just simply, do I want to use the CPU or GPU or both? And that's all the choice that you need to make to kind of wrap your head around the usage of those resources. There's nothing else that you have to do, thankfully. There's already hard enough our jobs to have to do more than that. So that's a good question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think we got through everybody in the room had a question. So
Well,
great talk. Thanks for taking us through that.
you got it. Thank you so much for coming.